Hey there, Juggies. I bet you haven't heard that one in a while if anyone's watching or has even watched McJuggerNuggets in the past 5 years, but who cares? Welcome to my definitive tier list of every single McJuggerNuggets published YouTube original web series from 2009 to 2022. This guy is probably my favorite YouTuber of all time, at least the most important to me, but his content fell off many years ago. And despite that, it's undeniable that there are still some incredible web series that he has produced, and I do love to come back to them every now and then. So let's get into it. Coming in at dead last is Overachievers. I have tried so hard to understand what the point of this is. Yes, I know it's part of his OG trilogy, which are just fun little home videos that somehow made it onto YouTube, but goddamn, this one is pretty much impossible to watch. I think what it does have going for it is the fact that it's like a time portal to the late 2000s. The video quality, the fact they're fighting over an Xbox 360 and all that shit. And maybe throw this one in the background, but definitely don't watch this on any psychedelics because it's like trying to burrow yourself into a schizophrenia patient's mind. It's also only like 15 episodes long, and each episode is 10 minutes or less. You could finish this in a little under 90 minutes if you want to. For some reason, I doubt any McJuggerNuggets fan has even watched this. It has like under 20,000 views. So the second series in F tier is Super Mario Bothers. Unlike Overachievers, I can kind of understand what's going on, and I definitely respected that a lot more. But that doesn't stop it from being just plain terrible. The storyline is nonsense. It is a little bit higher quality than Overachievers, but I think the acting is what makes it so bad. Jesse's close friend Buzz plays as Mario in the series, and he should have stopped getting acting scenes a long time ago, especially after this shit. There's not a whole bunch to say, but I think one cool thing it does have going for it is the fact that there's a 1 hour long finale, if you can stomach this outrageously bad series for that long. Moving up into E tier, we have The Game, which is definitely one of Jesse's most unique series. The story is surprisingly layered and thought out in comparison to the previous two, and it's clear that Jesse had a real plan. But unfortunately, none of that matters when you actually dive into the content of this one. Jesse unfortunately bit off more than he can chew here. It was just way too early in his career to dedicate to something this big. So it still has the same amount of amateur production that was seen in Overachievers and Mario Bothers. Only longer. So now it's boring. I don't think any human being can sit through this one more than once. It is rough. But all that being said, it did show that he had talent. He just needed a lot more time and technology to reach those heights. Next in the E tier is Jesse's most recent series to date, The Devil Inside Season 4. Where do I even begin with this one? It's so frustrating and messy and awful. This is a series that proved to me that Jesse had no real plan. No story to be told in his current Devil Inside series, and frankly, his YouTube series in general, which is a huge shame. This series is just depressing, intentionally so sometimes. Jesse is homeless and broke at one point, and even if it's unintentional, Jesse Tyler, the main character of the season, is a perfect lead. He's a directionless, bitter, washed-up hack who has no friends or connections, and everything he was known for is shit on and laughed at relentlessly. This series is not fun to watch. It's incredibly off-putting at times because of how miserable and depressing it gets, but other times the content is just so bad you really start to question if Jesse will ever reach the heights he had in the past. But I think what's most frustrating above all else is that every so often Jesse will drop a little seed that is somehow one of the best things he's ever done. There are a bunch of little moments throughout the series where you can just tell there's really something there. There's like some talent that's being brought back to life again. And then it's just thrown out, never seen again. And this happens again and again over the course of nearly 3 years. This is a pointless, soulless, empty season. And the ending sends it off accurately. Jesse made a 3-part ending, and the first 2 videos brought back what fans he had left, because they thought he had actually done it. The hub is genuinely a top 30 Jesse video. There's so much to love about it. And then after that, he releases... No, ignore the dumbass Easter video. He releases The Devil Resides, which is my pick for the worst video ever uploaded to Jesse's channel. Obviously, there have been lower quality, lower effort videos, but this episode is a spit in the face to everyone who had even an iota of curiosity or hype for the ending of this godforsaken season. It is the most insulting video I've ever watched. Porn-level parody acting, nonsensical story, non-existent pacing, and none of the big questions are answered, and the few that are have such bullshit anticlimactic resolutions that I wish they weren't. What a maddening waste of time. Next on the list is Rule 19, which I used to like a decent bit, but after watching it, it's just bad. There's so much tasteless humor, and bar a couple cool scenes in here and there. Oh, I forgot to mention, we're in D tier, by the way. Here and there, the story is just as nonsense as Overachievers in the game. But I think it's just a smidge more high quality. It's the best of the OG trilogy, but that isn't saying a lot. I think it really falls apart toward the end. When it starts to tie back into the game, I definitely lose interest around that point and just wait for it to be over. I don't know. The clone editing is cool, I guess, but it really has no impact on me. And even though its runtime is a third of the game's, it still feels like it drags on for way too long. Alright, so moving on to the middle of D tier is Jesse's second most recent series, The Devil Inside Season 3. I don't feel nearly as strong about this one, but objectively I think it's lower quality than Season 4. The only reason I rank it above 4 is because it's so much less offensive and frustrating. It's a stupid parody of the current YouTube climate, Jesse's own Psycho series, and other aspects of Jesse's life. It doesn't take itself too seriously for the majority of its runtime, and it does have a few videos here and there that are nice to revisit, but a lot of it is just kind of nothing. The story is also a lot less complicated to follow than 4. To put it simply, Jesse is supposed to move to LA after MVE ends, but then he decides not to, and he doesn't tell his parents, and then he loses all of his money betting on the Jake Paul fight from 2018. This is how old this is, by the way. And then he pretends to go to LA, ends up at Michael Kibiana-Karamis' house, ends up at Boogie's house. This is probably the peak of the series. Ends up back home for a little while, until he finally tells his dad he's not living in LA. Gets kicked out, wanders the freezing cold wilderness, and this is also a pretty fun part of the series. And then he comes back, signs an agreement, and has 2 months to find a house. Insert filler here. Eviction day comes, and the last viral moment of
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
Jesse's career happens. Now he's homeless again. He goes house hunting, lives in a realtor's office, finds mafia money, buys a house with mafia money, and this is where the series ends for me. But unfortunately, it doesn't actually end here. We get to the part where the Devil Inside story actually happens, and this is what makes the series so bad. I honestly would have put this at least the top of D tier if this part wasn't included in the story, but it does. And it is. It is laughably poor in comparison to the elements of Season 2. He does a much worse cameraman competition after Swift leaves, some other nonsense, Korn is back, Korn is gone, talks to a necklace, the end. What a great season. So at the top of D tier is Crisis. This one is so forgettable, but I get what he was trying to go for. This was just a strange thing to follow up the Psycho series with only 72 hours later. And I wouldn't blame someone if they didn't want to watch Jesse with amnesia search for Scrabble pieces guided by Uncle Larry's weird-ass acting. The best thing the series has going for it is that there are so many more screenshots and shots of Switzerland Psycho Kid that are available as a result of this series. I also like the ending where he gets his short hair and goes to VidCon. I vividly remember when this happened, and I was like, holy shit, this is real Jesse, guys. Maybe D's a little harsh, but nobody talks about this or remembers this series because it was such a limp way to immediately follow up one of the biggest events on YouTube that year. Moving on to C tier, we have Everyday Situations. This one's underrated. I actually like it a decent amount. It's like sub 30 minutes long, but it's the closest thing Jesse has to TikToks. And it came out like 5 years earlier. It's fun to put on in the background every few years, and it's just conventionally entertaining. But I can't put it above anything that comes or ahead of this, because it still is objectively stupid. But come on, it's kind of fun to watch and binge, and I think the ending's kind of nice with like the Devil Inside music was the first time he used it. Alright, so next in C tier is the Psycho Family documentary. So this is decent as a documentary. It was definitely an engaging first watch, but the rollout for this one is what ruined any hyper engagement. The doc was delayed like 4 or 5 times, and all of the BTS was released before and not long after. The BTS was the biggest hype factor around it, so it just kind of didn't really excite anybody or mean anything. There was no new information in this one either. I think it released like a month or so after Psycho. If it released like a month or so after Psycho, It would have been so much cooler. But Psycho had ended 10 months ago by the time it came out. And The Devil Inside Season 1 was in the middle of its run, and it was currently kind of moving his channel in a new direction. So it was just too little too late. And at the top of the C tier is Hollywood Hype. This is a fine series. Everyone hated it when it premiered, and it is completely purposeless, since the doc released 6 months after the series, even though the series was intended to tease the doc and also be like a prelude to the doc, even though it wasn't a prelude to anything. It had some fun, engaging moments. The biggest moment was when Psycho Dad destroyed Brian's apartment, which was awesome to see when it came out. And there's some fun moments, like Swift being the anonymous guy. I don't know. I can't bring myself to dislike this one. It came out right off the heels of Psycho and gave us the first true glimpse of Jesse's family outside the Psycho series storyline. This series also contained the first ever post-Psycho Devil Inside Easter egg, which was really unexpected and cool. It was never followed up on or mentioned again. I think this one just suffers from forgettable and pointless syndrome, and the rest of the 2016 series soloed it so hard. Which is unfortunate, but I still root for you, little guy. The only B-tier entry is The Devil Inside Season 2. This one's pretty good, but as a follow-up to Season 1, it definitely kind of fell flat. The season laid out the seeds for all the issues that would plague its later seasons, but it definitely suffered from a clear structuring issue. I think that was the point, but it still doesn't make the season fun to watch. And all that being said, there are some incredible moments in Season 2. The beginning arc with the weird mirror shard Jesse making the entire universe collapse in on itself was so cool and eerie. It's so underrated. I don't hear people talk about this enough. I mean, I don't hear people talk about Jesse in general, so whatever. But there was a lot of moments that just made me feel uneasy on those first few episodes. I just like how the first few episodes were like, they led you into a false sense of security. Now that real Jesse was back, but then you watch him slowly spiral into like a mess of all of his characters, and this influence reaches all of the other people. And when the act ends with Parker being fired, it was so good. The middle part after this was definitely the low point, but the ending arc with the cameraman competition and lead into MVE was just as good as the beginning. Definitely a solid season, and there's a lot of parts that are fun to rewatch, but I think we could see a lot of signs of what The Devil Inside Season 3 was going to become in this one. At the bottom of A tier, we have the Collab series. This one was a little oddball in between the two big holiday series, but it still slapped. And getting criticism out of the way first, this series was a tad bit unorganized. There's a few videos in the official playlist that the series definitely could have done without, but that doesn't really matter. This series is very bizarre in terms of its placement in the universe, and Jesse to this day has never released behind the scenes, nor has the main character of the season ever got a name. Nor has he even officially called back to it or referred to it as a series outside of mentions and references in later Devil Inside seasons. That's why I believe that the main character of the series is actually real Jesse from The Devil Inside, and this insane collab adventure shows the first signs of his collapse into letting the characters take over. There's a bunch of weird little hints at Jesse being crazy or something not being right with him. There's like a bunch of references to how the camera is changing him and whatnot. I think that these are all little inklings of the Devil Inside lore being spread out. Jesse also double snaps, if I'm recalling it correctly. I don't know, I haven't watched the ending in a while, but I think he snaps or double snaps at the end, but doesn't go into character. And go figure, his very next character is the Christmas Jesse, who is thrust into the universe without any awareness of who he is, but then he slowly starts to remember and develop into Christmas Jesse as the series goes on. He also tries to snap a few times in Christmas, and people like Juliet make comments about his snapper being broken, and his dad says stuff like, "I told you this was going to happen," and uses his fingers in a snapping motion. I think when he double snapped at the end of Collab, he did a universe change without realizing it, and this was the first indicator of his snapper being broken, which led into the tragedy of The Devil Inside 1's prologue. Sorry, spoiler for Christmas, but yeah, the Collab series, I think I think Jesse was going for something bigger with it. I think it really was supposed to be like a Devil Inside prologue. But who knows? I mean, this series is almost 10 years old, and nobody really talks about it, and most of this stuff has been kind of thrown to the wayside. But getting into the actual content of this one, the Boogie collab overshadows Mike's two sections pretty hard, but I still think it's right to give those parts credit, even if they aren't nearly as good as the Boogie stuff. But yeah, the highlight of this one is the very first Boogie collab. It is flawless in terms of atmosphere, execution, acting, and pacing, and they're really never able to recreate it again, even though they tried like 4 times, and it just kind of got worse each and every time. There's just such a tone and vibe about this one that is just so creepy and unique, and they just couldn't do it again. I think it's the fact that the entire Boogie collab is shot at night. We only see daylight after Jesse escapes, but for the entire Boogie storyline, it's always pitch black outside. It's also late November, just before winter, so all the trees are dead, and just fuck, the atmosphere is so good. Collab, you are my beloved. Next in A tier is The Spirit of Ursula. I love this one with all my heart. It's such a nice little adventure with a surprisingly tragic but engaging storyline. The journey to get there to the end is just so fun to watch, and the chemistry between Joe and Larry and Jesse will never be topped or honestly replicated in this fashion. The main flaw of this series is the beginning. I have no idea what Jesse was trying to do. I get he was trying to push the fact that Jesse, the character, didn't believe in ghosts, but I don't know what he was trying to do with these weird, intentionally bad videos, and there's a few videos at the beginning that don't really relate to the story. It's a mess. It's one of the, like I said, the only flaws with this series. But once it starts going and the story begins to like form, it's one of Jesse's best for sure. And even outside of the story moments, there's a lot of fun Jesse certified horror that is always interesting when coming from him. And also Bones is the best Juliet song in my opinion. She has yet to sound that good on any other song, and it gives me chills every time I listen to it. I love you, Ursula. At the top of A tier, we have the one, the only, Psycho series. What can I say about this one that hasn't already been said? Psycho is such a messy masterpiece of a series, with some insanely boring filler for over 50% of its runtime. But once you hit the November 2015 mark, none of that matters. You know, there's some of the best videos ever uploaded to YouTube in this section after November 2015, which is like when Jesse's glasses are broken / when the divorce happens. After that, the whole series is just effortlessly incredible. Now, of course, there's still some filler here and there, but that doesn't matter. I think it's still... So, yeah. But this series is objectively bloated, with an insane amount of filler, which is why I can't rank it above A. But the series outside the filler is still really, really fucking good. Jesse's descent into madness is so heartbreaking and real, and watching how the divorce rips the family apart is just, it's so hard, but you can't look away. This is just such a hopelessly tragic and nostalgic tale that has only aged better and gotten more nostalgic as and childhood coded as time has gone on. Which is probably an unintentional detail by Jesse. This series is old. Like, it's going to be a decade old in a couple years. And because of that, the nostalgia I feel when I watch through some of the little arcs, it's just so melancholy and, I don't know, warm at the same time. And I don't know how to describe nostalgia. But this series does what it's trying to do flawlessly. And I think that's all it needs. It will never not be fun to revisit. And one thing it has above the rest is of Jesse's webography is by far his most perfectly executed ending. The final arc and final 2 episodes of Psycho are genuinely perfect, and it might have some of the most consistently high quality videos and storytelling Jesse has ever done. Alright, now we're getting into S tier. This is where I put these 3 are what I consider to be the 3 GOATs. None of them are perfect, but I think as we go on from bottom to top, they just keep getting better and better. And the first of the 3 is the Christmas series. This one is another one that I think is pretty underrated. I don't really hear people talk about it. It kind of just happened, and then The Devil Inside happened and kind of overshadowed it. But this is such a perfect little series. And as I mentioned with the collab review, it's an unofficial prologue to The Devil Inside Season 1. The series is very brief. It's like 17 episodes and only lasts like a little over 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure. But it tells one of Jesse's simplest but most in-depth stories. And it's constantly good. And the drama acting is top tier. The Juliet episode actually still makes me tear up every time I rewatch it because Jesse was in his bag with the acting. It was just such a convincingly real scene for such a strange and foreign situation, which is what I love from Jesse. This is what he's really good at. And of course, his mom acted her heart out in The Ghost of Christmas Past, and it made us all realize just how good she is at acting. which we came to find out more and more as she began to do other stuff. The storyline of this one is just so short, sweet, and simple, but it also has so much layer. And I do like the ending a lot, even if I don't really care for the song too much. And I think it's just a cheesy little Christmas series. It was both not and meant to be. Okay, let me rephrase that. It was meant to be something big, but it was also meant to be something kind of small, in my opinion. Jesse never really officially talked about a lot of this in depth, but that's my interpretation of it. But yeah, I never get sick of this one. I rewatch it every Christmas, and I don't know, I love the Christmas series forever and ever. At number 2, in the S tier rank, we have My Virtual Escape. In many ways, this is Jesse's masterpiece, but in others, I feel like it was his first time testing the waters of a new genre, and it was nowhere near the level it could be. MVE is objectively Jesse's best work. Well, in my opinion, I think I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's fully character-driven, fully cinematic, and it has a clear storyline to follow with no vlog filler most of the time. And the story is also his most unique and well thought out. And it has its own original soundtrack, completely original by Juliet, with some hit or miss tracks, but there's some really good stuff in there. I love this series to death. And if I was ranking it by season, seasons 2 and 3 would be at the top of this list, no doubt. But I think the series as a whole is just too flawed to be the absolute peak of Jesse's career. Season 1 was a rough landing into his new style. The acting is very lopsided, the pacing is sluggish, and the tone doesn't match the rest of the series. It certainly picks up towards the end, but a few of the early Season 1 episodes are just tough to get through. And Season 4 is rough too. It's far and away the worst season of the whole show. It is the only season I believe that is fully scripted and written. And I love Jesse, but I think he does better with improv than actual writing, because some of the lines in this are just fucking terrible. And some of the acting is also unexcusably bad, especially after why season 4 is so bad is because we already saw what they were capable of with season 2 and 3. And then they just get back into it, and then they get back into the hole they were in season 1, but it's even worse somehow. I don't know. These are what I think are the worst issues with season 4. The entire last 10 minutes of Haven is the worst of the worst for the entire show by far. What were they fucking doing? I genuinely think it was a joke, or they just forgot that it was so shitty and they forgot to fucking cut it out. I don't know. A Tangled Web is a massive exposition dump with some awful pacing and unintentionally long scenes, or no, not unintentionally, unneededly long scenes, that, and this big exposition dump that, gives you coverage of the entire story comes 2 episodes before said story is retconned. What the fuck was the point? Judgment Day is Isaac versus Arachnid, and it's a fight that feels earned at first, but makes zero sense when you rewatch Isaac's character journey in season 4. Isaac doesn't actually kill anybody before he gets to Arachnid in season 4. The last time he kills somebody is Jesus. And this moment sends him over the edge. And I think him killing Jesus was such a, I don't know, it showed him that this game was ruining his life almost. And I think season 4, him developing into someone who has his maturity arc and whatnot, I don't think killing Arachnid was the way to go. I think he should have just turned him into the police and brought the operation down, especially after he figured out that he wasn't getting his sister back. His father was dead, and now everyone he knew was dead. So, I don't know, what was the point? I guess it's depressing. It's a revenge episode, and Isaac learns that everything was for nothing, but what the fuck was the point of it then? You know what I mean? And the same sentiment shares or bleeds into Break Free, which is oh god, I'm stuttering bad. So Break Free is it was all a dream ending. And on top of that, the first half is just confusing and bad. Like I said, it has flaws, and a lot of them. And I think that's what makes it not as good as my number one pick. And I think why these flaws upset me even more is because it was so close to being perfect. Not perfect. Perfect for Jesse's standards. It was so close, but there's just so many little issues that are sprinkled throughout. And I think he needs to try it a few more times before it really gets going. So yeah, if Psycho series is Jesse's messy masterpiece, this is his messier masterpiece. I feel like this is a modern version of the game. He's in this new era of his career, and he has more resources and time and exposure. The only thing I'm still waiting for is for him to expand upon the style. But it's been almost 6 years, and the 2 series have gone after this were... yeah. Anyway, getting on to my number 1 pick, drum roll please, is The Devil Inside Season 1. I don't think this is a popular opinion, but goddamn, I love this series, man. I think this is Jesse's least flawed series, and it has his best character as well, Isaac. It's just a shockingly human story about someone in an unthinkable situation. Isaac finds himself in Jesse's world, and he tries so desperately to replace him so he can live his life, but he keeps fucking it up over and over until everyone finds out what he really is. And then they try to force him out of the reality. It's such a tragic introduction to this tragic character, and I really wouldn't have this intro done in any other way. This series is the definitive version of Jesse's iconic vlog style. This is the best it's ever been, and probably the best it'll ever be. The acting never really falters, and even though it's so dark and dingy, it's so fucking funny at the same time in certain points. There's some incredible comedy, especially in the later half, which is weird. Anyway, yeah. It just has every single Jesse perk wrapped into one perfectly length series. The only thing my Virtual Escape truly has over it is rewatchability. There's a few little arcs in this one, like the LA arc, that suffer from filler, but nothing major. This series is classic, and seeing season 2, 3, and 4 come after it is incredibly upsetting. It's like season 1 wasn't supposed to be as good as it ended up being. Because the later seasons never really recaptured that feeling or style again. But yeah, that's my definitive tier list of all of Jesse's series. I hope you enjoyed my ranking of all McJuggerNuggets series. Let me know if you all agree with my picks or if you have some hot takes. Have a good one.